Welcome to another CS0 Intro to Java Programming video. In this video, I'm going to talk about layout managers. I'm also going to talk a little bit about JPanels. All right, so we've talked about layout managers before. We've talked about the flow layout, and that the flow layout is going to set up a container such that when you add contents to it, when you add different components to it, they will flow across the container, and when it gets to the end of the container, it's going to push the next component down to the next line. That's what a flow is. You can think about flow layout being kind of like typing in a text editor. When you get to the end of the line, it's going to continue typing on the line below. That's how flow layout works. Well, we have another layout manager called BorderLayout, and a BorderLayout looks like this. BorderLayout is going to break up a container of some sort into 5 zones: the north zone, south, east, west, and center. Those zones can contain J components of some sort. They can contain J panels, they can contain things like J buttons, and whatever you want. Any kind of J component that you can add to a J frame can be added into those different zones. For the most part, the way I'm going to use BorderLayout is I'm going to use it to break up the frame and put J panels in each of those zones, and then use those J panels as holders for different GUI components. Things like J labels and buttons and radio buttons and you name it, we could put into those different areas. But the BorderLayout Manager allows us to control what areas of the frame we want to put things in. So let's just take a look at the code. In this video, in this file, I've got 5 J panels: top, bottom, left, right, and center. I've got 5 labels that will correspond with those: top label, bottom label, left label, right label, and center label. And in the main method, I do all the stuff that I always do in a main method. Instantiate my object, set the size, set default, close operation. And now I'm setting layout. We've seen set layout before. I've done new flow layout in there. But this time I'm going to do border layout. What border layout is going to do is it will break it up into those 5 zones. Okay, so this is how you do it. New border layout, nothing special about it. Then I'm going to call in my create GUI. This is where we start to use that border layout and the interesting stuff starts to happen. All right, in the create GUI, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my J panels and I'm going to create my labels. I'm going to set the backgrounds on the J panels. I'm just going to space this out a little so we can see it better. So creating a J panel looks like this. Top gets new J panel, and then I'm going to pass new flow layout into it. So we have the ability to set the layout on J panels with any layout manager we want. I'm just going to use flow layout for now on the J panel. And then I'm going to set the background color. J panels have a graphics context as well as a content pane. So the content pane, as you may recall, allows us to stick things to it, kind of like I've described it as a magnet board, and the J components being magnets that we're sticking to the magnet board. Well, a J panel has that kind of content pane as well. So it allows me to have a finite area of my frame that I'm going to put different J components in. It allows me to more precisely organize my frame the way I want it to be organized. So I'm setting the top to flow layout and setting its background color to cyan. And you can see that top has been set to cyan. I'm doing the same thing for the bottom panel, the left panel, the right panel, and the center panel. So I've created all my panels and set all their background colors and set their layouts to flow. Now I'm going to make my labels. This is nothing new. We've seen this plenty of times before. Then I'm going to add the labels. Now, instead of adding the labels to the frame, I'm adding them to the panels. This allows us to organize our space better. So if I add top label to top, that top label is only going to go in here. bottom label to bottom, left label to left, right label to right, center label to center. Well, what if I, put several of them in top, for example? I'm going to put bottom label in top. I'm going to put left label in top. And you'll see how this is going to work. Since these panels are all flow layouts, that's going to move these three labels up to the top. You got top, bottom, and left up here, and you can see that these zones now have nothing in them. They haven't fully collapsed because there are panels in them, but they don't have stuff in them anymore. Right? So whatever component you add another component to, that's where it goes. So you can see here I added top label to top, I added bottom label to top, and I added left label to top. And given that they went top, bottom, left, that's the order that they'll show up in that flow layout on that panel. Okay? So that's how adding components to panels works. Once again, it allows us to organize our space in a way that, that just adding things to the frame does not allow us to do. So I'm going to undo these changes. There we go. Now, after I add all of my components to their panels, I have to add the panels to the window. So the window is the content pane for my JFrame. If I don't do any of these things, and I run it, you'll see that nothing is going to be added to the frame. See, the frame is just blank. Well, I added things to these panels, so shouldn't they be on the frame? Well, no, because I have not added those panels to the frame. Anything that you want to show up in the frame has to be added to that content pane for the frame, and that's what this is. Window.add, and then top. And this is where we choose where we want them to go in the border layout. Given that the frame has the border layout, the frame's content pane is broken up in the way that that border layout is broken up. So I'm going to add my top to border layout north. Now border layout north is a static constant integer in the border layout class. And these integers here tell us where it's going to, where the border layout is going to place whatever we're adding. So when we do border layout north, it's going to put it in the very top. Border layout south, it's going to put it in the bottom. Border layout west, it'll put it in the left. Border layout east in the right side, and border layout center in the center. Okay? So that's how the border layout works, and that's how you add things to a border layout. So what we have here once again is we have our JFrame broken down as a border layout. We've got 5 J panels, each of them having a flow layout with some labels added to them. And then we are going to choose which zones we want those panels to get added to in the frame. So north, south, east, west, and center. We have to make sure that we add the labels to their panels, and then we add those panels to the frame. Well, what happens when we don't add something to the frame? Let's see what happens when I choose to not add the left and the right. I'll comment these two. Here. That's not what I wanted to do. Where are we? There we are. I'll comment these two out, and I'll run it again. Left and right got commented out, and they never got added to the window. And you can see that those zones of the frame in their border layout have collapsed. In other words, since those panels aren't there, nothing shows up in those zones. You don't have to add something to every zone of a border layout. You could just use top and center. You could just use bottom and center. You could just use left and center, or whatever. Whatever zones you don't add something to will collapse, except for one. And let's see what that one is. I'm going to bring these two back here, and I'm going to comment out center, and I'll run it. Nothing got added to center, but it leaves a void in the middle. Now, the way that the border layout zones are going to work is that the top, or the north, south, east, and west will be just big enough to fit their contents. So if I put a label into the right or into the east that says right on it, it's only going to be wide enough for the word right. If I put only top in here, it's only going to be tall enough to fit top. And so they kind of collapse. And you can see that when I don't add something in there, they collapse entirely and disappear. So the zones are going to only take up as much space as they need. Now, given that they only take up as much space as they need, and we've set a height and width, the center takes up the rest of the space. Well, if we don't put a center in there, it's just going to be a void that shows the background of the frame there. All right, so when I put the center back in, you're going to see that center takes up all available space. And you can see that right here. It takes up all available space. It gets bigger and smaller. The other zones don't get bigger and smaller, but center does. Oftentimes what I do when I'm laying things out in a border layout is I will use the center for sure and then decide what other zones I want to use, top or bottom or left or right. I pretty much never leave center out of this. Center is usually where you're going to put all the main content in your J-frame. And then top might be things like your title, and left and right might be GUI components, bottom might be GUI components, but center is always going to be sort of the main content of what you're putting in your frame. All right, so that's a little bit about border layout, and that's how we use it. What I encourage you to do now is when you're done watching this video, go into this file and edit it. I put some comments in here that describe what you can try to do. Maybe try adding some more labels and fields. Maybe try and add a button. Maybe see if you can make it interactive. Add a JText area that's going to be an output area so that you could take text into those fields, hit a button, and then submit it to the text area. Play around with this a little bit until you feel really comfortable with the way the border layout works. Thanks for watching.